Ambassador Hyun-ki walked into the Galactic Council chamber with the same calm expression he had worn for the past 30 years. His black diplomatic uniform was perfectly pressed, his silver hair combed neatly back, and his hands folded behind, his back in the patient manner that had become his trademark. The other species representatives were already arguing loudly about trade routes and mining rights, their various alien voices creating a chaotic symphony that echoed off the crystal dome overhead. The Varix delegate, a tall creature with 4 arms and scales that shifted from green to purple when agitated, was speaking in harsh tones about human expansion into what they claimed was their territory. Hyun-ki had heard this complaint 17 times in the past month. He took his seat at the human delegation table and waited for his turn to speak, just as he always did. When the Varix finished their accusation, Hyun-ki stood slowly and activated his translation device. His voice carried clearly across the chamber, measured and respectful as always. He explained that the human colony ship had followed all proper procedures, filed the correct paperwork, and received approval from the council before establishing new Sol on the disputed moon. He showed the documents on the main display, highlighting each stamp and signature with infinite patience. The Varix delegate hissed in frustration. Their scales turned a deeper purple, and they slammed one of their 4 fists on their speaking podium. They accused humans of being weak and hiding behind paperwork instead of fighting for what they wanted like real warriors. Several other species delegates laughed at this comment, their various forms of amusement filling the chamber with clicks, growls, and chirping sounds. Hyun-ki simply nodded and returned to his seat. This was how most council sessions ended these days. Humans presented facts, other species made threats, and everyone went home without any real resolution. It had been this way since Earth joined the galactic community 3 decades ago. Back on Earth, Admiral Bo-Ra was having a very different kind of meeting. She stood in the war room deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by holographic displays showing human ship movements across known space. Her short gray hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her blue military uniform bore the insignia of Earth Defense Command. The displays showed hundreds of ships marked as cargo vessels and research craft, but Bo-Ra knew better. Commander Subin entered the room carrying a data pad filled with the latest reports from the frontier. Her young face was tight with anger as she handed over the information. 3 more human cargo ships had been attacked by Varix raiders in the past week. No one had been killed this time, but the raiders had stolen valuable medical supplies destined for human colonies. Bo-Ra read the report while Dr. Wu Jin analyzed the attack patterns on his computer. The elderly scientist had been studying alien military tactics for 20 years, and his findings always made for interesting reading. He explained that the Varix were testing human responses, seeing how far they could push before Earth retaliated. They were treating humans like prey animals, checking if their victims would fight back or just run away. Subin suggested sending armed escorts with the next cargo convoy, but Bo-Ra shook her head. The current policy was clear. Humans would defend themselves only when directly attacked, and even then they would use minimal force. Earth's leaders believed that showing restraint would eventually earn them respect from the other galactic powers. Meanwhile, on the Varix homeworld, military commanders were planning their next move against human settlements. They had studied human responses to previous attacks and concluded that Earth's species was weak and cowardly. Humans always ran to the council with complaints instead of fighting back like proper warriors. This made them perfect targets for raids and territorial expansion. The Varix had been a military power for over 2,000 years, conquering dozens of worlds and enslaving countless species. They respected only strength and viewed human diplomacy as a sign of inferior genetics. Their latest intelligence reports showed that human colonies were poorly defended, with most settlements having only basic security forces and outdated weapons. Back in the council chamber, Hyun-ki was presenting another formal complaint about Varix aggression. He spoke in the same calm tone he always used, explaining how the attacks violated 17 different galactic treaties and requesting immediate action from the council. The other delegates listened with barely concealed boredom, some of them checking their personal devices while he spoke. The Thraxian representative, a massive creature covered in blue fur, interrupted Hyun-Ki's presentation to ask why humans never fought back. They suggested that maybe Earth species was naturally passive and unsuited for space colonization. Several other delegates agreed, saying that weak species often went extinct when they left their home planets. Hyun-Ki paused his presentation and looked directly at the Thraxian delegate. For just a moment, something cold flickered in his eyes, but his voice remained perfectly polite when he responded. He explained that humans preferred to resolve conflicts through peaceful means because they understood the true cost of war. He said that violence should always be the last resort, used only when all other options had been exhausted. The Varix delegate laughed loudly at this response, their scales shifting to bright yellow with amusement. They announced that their species would continue expanding into human territory until Earth learned to defend itself properly. Several other military species voiced their agreement, saying that weak civilizations deserved whatever happened to them. As the session ended, Hyun-Ki gathered his documents and walked toward the exit. Other delegates passed him without acknowledgement, treating him like furniture that happened to be in their way. He had grown used to this treatment over the years, but lately something was changing in his patient demeanor. That evening, Hyun-Ki sent his daily report back to Earth. He included transcripts of the day's session and his own analysis of growing alien hostility. He noted that diplomatic solutions were becoming less effective as other species interpreted human restraint as weakness. He recommended that Earth begin considering alternative approaches to galactic relations. The report was read by every member of Earth's Leadership Council within hours of transmission. Admiral Boras smiled grimly as she finished reading Hyun-Ki's careful diplomatic language. She understood what he was really saying. Patience was running out, and the galaxy was about to learn something very important about human nature. 3 months had passed since the Varix destroyed the research station at Kepler 442b. The attack had been swift and brutal, turning a peaceful scientific outpost into floating debris and scattered bodies in less than an hour. 347 human researchers, engineers, and their families had died while conducting agricultural experiments that were supposed to help feed the galaxy's growing population. General Tai Ho stood in the same war room where Admiral Bo-Ra had once planned defensive strategies, but now the holographic displays showed something very different. Ships that had been marked as cargo vessels and research craft were revealing their true nature, their hulls opening to expose weapon systems that should not have existed on civilian vessels. The gentle mask of human space presence was finally slipping away. Captain Insu received his orders through encrypted channels while his ship drifted in what appeared to be a routine patrol pattern near the Vega system. His vessel looked like a standard human transport, the kind that aliens had been attacking with impunity for months. But when the Varix raiders approached expecting easy prey, they discovered that appearances could be very deceiving. The engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Insu's ship dropped its false exterior panels to reveal advanced shield generators and weapon arrays that the Varix had never seen before. The human vessel moved with impossible speed and precision, its weapons cutting through Varix armor like tissue paper. When the brief battle ended, 12 Varix ships had been reduced to scrap metal while the human vessel remained completely undamaged. Analyst Ye Jin was monitoring communications across 17 star systems when the reports started coming in. Her workstation in Earth's intelligence center was suddenly flooded with panicked alien transmissions describing impossible human capabilities, ships that moved faster than physics should allow, weapons that bypassed all known defensive systems, and tactics that suggested humans had been studying alien military doctrine for decades. The Varix military command was in chaos following Captain Insu's demonstration. Their admirals gathered in emergency session to analyze what had happened to their raiding fleet. The sensor data made no sense according to their understanding of human technology. The weapon signatures didn't match anything in their databases, and the ship's movement patterns suggested propulsion systems far beyond what Earth was supposed to possess. Engineer Daun smiled as she read the intelligence reports flowing in from across human space. Her team had spent 15 years developing the technologies that were now being revealed to the galaxy. Weapons that could adjust their frequency to penetrate any known shield design. Propulsion systems that bent space-time in ways that alien scientists insisted were impossible, and defensive measures that made human ships nearly invulnerable to conventional attack. But the most important revelation was not technological. As more human ships dropped their peaceful disguises, the galaxy began to understand that Earth had been playing a very long game. Every cargo vessel, every research ship, every civilian transport had been carefully designed to hide massive military capabilities. Humans had not been weak or unprepared. They had been waiting. The Thraxian delegate who had mocked human weakness in the council chamber now found himself reviewing intelligence reports that painted a very different picture of Earth's capabilities. Thraxian spy networks had been watching human space for years, but they had completely missed the true scale of human military preparation. Ships they had dismissed as harmless transports were revealing themselves to be advanced warships carrying enough firepower to level entire planets. Commander Seok-jin led a squadron of vessels that the aliens had catalogued as deep space mining ships. When Varric's forces attacked a human mining operation in the Tau Ceti system, they discovered that the mining equipment could be rapidly converted into devastating weapons. Asteroid-moving engines became kinetic bombardment systems, and ore processing facilities revealed themselves to be military manufacturing plants. The attack on Tau Ceti became a massacre, but not in the way the Varrics had planned. Their assault fleet of 40 ships was systematically dismantled by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. Mining ships revealed hidden weapon systems, cargo haulers deployed fighter squadrons, and what had appeared to be a helpless civilian operation turned into a perfectly coordinated military response. Dr. Hai Ri had been studying alien psychology and military doctrine since humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. Her research had identified weaknesses in every major species' tactical thinking, from the Varric's tendency toward frontal assault to the Thraxian reliance on overwhelming numbers. This knowledge was now being put to devastating use as human forces engaged alien military units across multiple star systems. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to address what they termed the human military revelation. Representatives from dozens of species demanded explanations for Earth's deception. They accused humans of violating treaties that limited military buildup and questioned whether Earth had ever been honest about their capabilities. Ambassador Hyun Ki returned to the council chamber, but this time he was not alone. General Tai Ho accompanied him, wearing the black and silver uniform of Earth Defense Command. The general's presence sent a clear message that diplomacy was no longer Earth's only option for dealing with galactic problems. When called upon to explain human actions, Hyun Ki stood with the same calm dignity he had always shown. But his words carried a new weight that made the chamber fall silent. He explained that humans had never lied about their capabilities. They had simply chosen not to demonstrate them. Earth had hoped that peaceful coexistence was possible, but recent events had proven that the galaxy only respected strength. The Varric's delegate demanded to know how many ships Earth actually possessed and what other weapons they had hidden. Hyun Ki's response was simple and terrifying in its implications. He said that what the galaxy had witnessed so far represented less than 10% of Earth's actual military capacity. The ships revealed in recent engagements were not humanity's main battle fleet. They were just the security forces assigned to protect civilian operations. General Tai Ho activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of human space presence. Hundreds of systems that aliens thought were empty actually contained hidden military installations. Ships that had been conducting peaceful exploration for decades revealed themselves to be advanced scouts mapping alien territories and identifying strategic targets. The revelation that shook the galactic community most was the timeline. Humans had not built this military capacity in response to recent attacks. They had been preparing since before they joined the Council. Earth had spent 30 years studying every species, learning their weaknesses, and positioning assets throughout known space while maintaining a facade of peaceful exploration. As the council session ended, delegates from across the galaxy rushed to contact their home governments with urgent warnings about human capabilities. The species that had dismissed Earth as weak and primitive now faced the terrifying realization that they had been watched, studied, and potentially outmaneuvered by the very people they had underestimated. Ambassador Hyun-ki gathered his documents and prepared to leave the chamber, but this time other delegates stepped aside to let him pass. The casual dismissal and condescending attitudes were gone, replaced by the wary respect that came with recognizing a predator that had been hiding among sheep. Fleet Admiral Junho stood on the bridge of the ESS Incheon, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Varric's territory. What the aliens saw was not the small defensive force they expected, but a massive armada of ships that defied everything they thought they knew about human military capacity. The vessels that materialized were not disguised cargo haulers or converted civilian craft. These were purpose-built instruments of war that had been hidden in deep space for decades. The Varric's High Command had made a critical miscalculation after the initial human military demonstrations. Instead of recognizing the warning for what it was, they had convinced themselves that Earth was bluffing about their true capabilities. They believed that humans had revealed their entire military force in those early engagements, and that continued pressure would force Earth back into submission. Colonel Mireille led her Special Forces team through the corridors of a Varric's military station that had been considered impregnable until 30 minutes ago. Her soldiers moved with precision that spoke of years of training in alien environments, their equipment perfectly adapted to exploit Varric's physiological weaknesses that Dr. Hiri had identified through careful study. The station's defenders had never encountered tactics designed specifically to counter their natural advantages. The galaxy watched in shock as human forces demonstrated capabilities that should have taken centuries to develop. Ships moved through space using propulsion systems that bent the laws of physics. Weapons penetrated defenses that had protected alien worlds for millennia, and human soldiers fought with an efficiency that suggested they had been preparing for this conflict since first contact. Commander Seok Jin adapted naval warfare tactics to space combat in ways that alien military theorists had never imagined possible. His submarines had once hunted enemy vessels beneath Earth's oceans. Now his ships used similar stealth techniques to appear within alien defensive perimeters without warning. The psychological effect of human vessels materializing inside supposedly secure space was devastating to alien morale. Dr. Hayari's research stations across human space were working around the clock to provide tactical intelligence about every species that had joined the growing alliance against Earth. Her teams had spent decades studying alien biology, psychology, and military doctrine, creating detailed profiles that allowed human forces to predict and counter enemy strategies before they were even implemented. The Thraxian Empire decided to test human resolve by launching a massive assault on the human colony at Wolf 359. Their battle fleet of over 200 ships represented the largest military force they had assembled in 50 years. The Thraxian admirals were confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm whatever defenses the humans had managed to deploy. The Battle of Wolf 359 lasted 6 hours and became a case study in the difference between quantity and quality. Human defensive systems that had been invisible until the moment of attack revealed themselves to be far more sophisticated than anything the galaxy had seen before. Planetary shield generators created barriers that Thraxian weapons could not penetrate, while automated defense platforms emerged from asteroid fields to engage the attacking fleet. But it was the human counterattack that truly demonstrated Earth's capabilities. A single human battle group, consisting of just 12 ships, systematically dismantled the entire Thraxian assault force. The human vessels moved with impossible coordination, their weapons striking with surgical precision that disabled enemy ships without destroying them completely. The message was clear. Humans could have annihilated the entire fleet, but chose to show restraint even in warfare. The surviving Thraxian ships limped home carrying news that changed everything their government thought they knew about human military doctrine. Earth was not just defending its territory, they were demonstrating the ability to project power across vast distances with minimal resources. The implications were terrifying for species that had built their power on the assumption that humans were technologically inferior. Ambassador Hyun-ki returned to the Galactic Council chamber one final time in his role as Earth's diplomatic representative. The same delegates who had once ignored his presentations now hung on every word he spoke. The casual dismissal and mocking laughter were gone, replaced by the tense attention of beings who had finally realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had imagined. General Taeho accompanied Hyun-ki to the podium, but this time he carried a data crystal containing Earth's final diplomatic communication to the galactic community. The message had been carefully crafted by Earth's Leadership Council after extensive analysis of the current military situation and projections for future alien behavior. Hyun-ki activated the chamber's main display and began reading Earth's ultimatum in the same calm voice he had used for 30 years of diplomatic presentations. But the words carried a weight that made even the largest alien delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Earth was giving the galaxy one final chance to resolve the current conflict through peaceful means. The ultimatum was simple and terrifying in its implications. All attacks on human ships, colonies, and personnel must cease immediately. Any species currently engaged in hostilities with Earth had 72 standard hours to withdraw their forces from human space and formally request peace negotiations. Failure to comply would result in Earth abandoning all pretense of restraint in its military responses. The final sentence of the ultimatum became the moment that changed galactic history forever. Hyun-ki looked directly into the recording devices that would carry his words to every inhabited world in known space, and delivered Earth's message with quiet authority that cut through the chamber like a blade. Stop attacking or we stop pretending to be polite. The silence that followed was absolute. For 30 years, the galaxy had mistaken human politeness for weakness, diplomatic restraint for inability to act. Now they understood that Earth's measured responses had been a choice, not a limitation. Humans had been holding back not because they lacked the power to retaliate, but because they understood the true cost of unleashing that power. The Varix delegate was the first to break the silence, their scales shifting through colors that indicated extreme agitation. They demanded to know what right humans had to threaten the entire galaxy, accusing Earth of revealing their true nature as a species of warmongers and conquerors. Their outrage was shared by several other military species who saw human strength as a direct challenge to their own power. Hyun-ki's response was delivered with the same diplomatic courtesy he had shown for 3 decades, but now every delegate understood the steel beneath the silk. He explained that humans had no desire for conquest or domination. They wanted only to be left in peace to pursue their own development. But if the galaxy insisted on treating peaceful intentions as weakness, Earth was prepared to demonstrate why that assumption was dangerous. The session ended with delegates rushing to contact their home governments with urgent warnings about Earth's capabilities and intentions. Species that had been planning to join the anti-human alliance suddenly found themselves reconsidering their positions. Others began calculating whether their existing military forces could possibly stand against the human war machine that had been hiding in plain sight for 30 years. As Hyun-ki and General Taeho left the council chamber, the old diplomat turned to the military officer with a sad smile. He had spent his entire career believing that reason and patience could overcome any conflict. Now he understood that sometimes peace could only be achieved by demonstrating the capacity for total war. The galaxy had 72 hours to prove him wrong. President Yuna stood in the Situation Room beneath Seoul, surrounded by displays showing military preparations across human space. The 72-hour deadline had passed without a single species responding to Earth's ultimatum. Instead, 7 major alien powers had formed the Human Containment Alliance, declaring their intention to put humanity back in what they called their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Admiral Kyung-soo received the authorization codes that released all restrictions on human military operations. For 30 years, Earth's forces had operated under rules of engagement, designed to minimize casualties and avoid escalating conflicts. Those rules no longer applied. The fleet emerging from hidden bases throughout human space represented the largest military force ever assembled by any species in galactic history. The first target was a Varix military installation that had been used to coordinate attacks on human colonies. Major Yoonji led the assault force that materialized in the system without warning, their ships having traveled through hyperspace corridors that alien scientists insisted were impossible to navigate safely. The station's defenders had perhaps 10 minutes to realize they were under attack before their installation was reduced to component atoms. Specialist Dong Hyun worked from a ship that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, using quantum communication arrays to disrupt alien command networks across multiple star systems. His electronic warfare capabilities were so advanced that enemy commanders found themselves receiving orders they had never given, while their own communications were intercepted and decoded before they could be transmitted. The Thraxian home. Fleet moved to intercept what they believed was a small human raiding force approaching their capital system. Instead, they encountered Admiral Kyung-soo's main battle group, consisting of ships that defied every assumption about human technology. The engagement that followed became known as the Massacre of Proxima Thrax, though calling it a battle implied that both sides had been able to fight. Human vessels demonstrated capabilities that violated several fundamental laws of physics as alien scientists understood them. Ships phased in and out of normal spacetime, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. Energy shields absorbed incoming fire and converted it into power for human weapon systems. Most terrifying of all, human ships appeared to be learning and adapting to alien tactics in real time. The Varix homeworld had been considered impregnable for over 1,000 years, protected by orbital fortresses and defensive systems that had never been successfully challenged. Human forces bypassed these defenses entirely by emerging from hyperspace inside the planet's atmosphere, their ships materializing directly above major population centers with a precision that should have been impossible. Colonel Mirai's ground forces landed in the Varix capital, while their government was still trying to understand how human ships had appeared inside their planetary shields. Her soldiers moved through the city with equipment that adapted to local conditions automatically, their armor shifting color and configuration to match the urban environment, while their weapons adjusted their output to disable rather than destroy. The conquest of the Varix homeworld took exactly 72 hours, the same amount of time Earth had given the galaxy to respond to their ultimatum. Human forces demonstrated surgical precision in their operations, capturing key installations while avoiding civilian casualties. The message was clear. Earth could have destroyed the planet, but chose conquest over annihilation. Dr. Hayeri's psychological profiles of alien leadership proved devastatingly accurate as human forces exploited cultural and biological weaknesses that their enemies had never recognized as vulnerabilities. Thraxian pack instincts were turned against them through targeted disruption of their command hierarchies. Varix territorial behaviors were manipulated to create chaos in their military responses. The Kelraxian Empire attempted to use their vast numerical superiority to overwhelm human positions through sheer volume of ships and soldiers. They discovered that quantity meant nothing when facing an enemy that could predict their movements, counter their tactics, and destroy their forces faster than they could be replaced. Human automated systems eliminated Kelraxian fleets while human commanders focused on more challenging targets. President Yuna addressed the galaxy through every available communication channel. Her words broadcast to billions of beings who were watching their military powers crumble before human might. She explained that Earth had never wanted this war, but since the galaxy had chosen violence, humanity would demonstrate why that choice was a mistake. The speech that changed everything came when Yuna revealed the true scope of human military preparation. The forces currently devastating alien military units represented less than 20% of Earth's actual capabilities. The ships and soldiers that had conquered the Varix homeworld and shattered the Thraxian fleet were not humanity's elite forces. They were standard units equipped with basic gear. Engineer Dayun's weapons laboratories were finally allowed to demonstrate technologies that had been classified beyond even Earth's highest security levels. Planet-killing devices that could crack worlds like eggs, stellar manipulation tools that could cause suns to go nova, and weapons that could erase entire star systems from existence. These capabilities had existed for decades, held in reserve for threats that required ultimate solutions. The Human Containment Alliance began fragmenting as member species realized they were not fighting a war they could win. Intelligence reports showed human forces appearing in systems that should have been unreachable, striking targets that should have been undetectable, and achieving objectives that should have been impossible. Every assumption about human limitations was being systematically demolished. Commander Subin led fighter squadrons that moved through space like schools of fish, their coordination so perfect that alien observers suspected they were controlled by a single artificial intelligence. The reality was more disturbing. Human pilots had been training for this war since childhood, their skills honed through decades of simulated combat against every known alien military doctrine. The siege of the Mortarian fortress world became a demonstration of human patience and precision working together. Instead of assaulting the planet's defenses directly, human forces surrounded the system and began systematically dismantling its infrastructure. Supply convoys vanished without trace, communication networks failed mysteriously, and defensive systems shut down for no apparent reason. Admiral Kyung-Soo's fleet appeared above the Kelraxian capital, just as their government was preparing to surrender. The massive human ships hung in orbit like silent monuments to the futility of resisting Earth's military might. Their weapons remained powered but not aimed, a gesture of restraint that somehow made them more threatening than any direct attack could have been. The final blow to alien resistance came when human forces revealed their intelligence networks. Every major government in the galaxy discovered that humans had been watching them for decades, infiltrating their societies, studying their weaknesses, and preparing for this exact scenario. Earth had known about every secret military project, every hidden base, and every classified weapon system that their enemies possessed. President Yuna's final message to the Human Containment Alliance was delivered from the bridge of a human ship hovering above 7 different alien capital worlds simultaneously. She offered the galaxy one last chance to surrender, before Earth demonstrated why humanity had spent 30 years pretending to be weak. The alternative was the complete destruction of every species that had chosen to threaten human existence. The surrender came within hours, transmitted on every emergency frequency in galactic space. 7 civilizations that had dominated the galaxy for millennia formally capitulated to a species they had dismissed as primitives just months before. The age of human politeness was over, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Chancellor Minho walked into the rebuilt Galactic Council chamber, wearing the same simple diplomatic uniform that Ambassador Hyun-Ki had favored for 30 years. But everything else about the chamber had changed dramatically. The seating arrangement now reflected the new power structure, with Earth's delegation occupying the central position that had once belonged to the Varix Confederation. Around them sat representatives from species that were now classified as protectorates under human oversight. 1 year had passed since humanity stopped pretending to be polite, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The species that had formed the Human Containment Alliance were now learning what it meant to live under the protection of the very beings they had tried to destroy. It was a lesson in humility that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. General Su Young commanded the Galactic Peacekeeping Force from a massive space station positioned at the center of what had once been neutral territory. Her ships patrolled trade routes that had been plagued by piracy for centuries, ensuring that merchant vessels could travel safely regardless of their species of origin. The irony was not lost on anyone. The galaxy was more peaceful under human military dominance than it had ever been under the old council system. Ambassador Ji-Wan had the delicate task of managing diplomatic relations with former enemies who were now struggling to accept their new status. Her office received dozens of requests each day from alien governments seeking clarification on human policies, permission for military actions, and guidance on economic development. The species that had once mocked human weakness now depended on human approval for their most basic governmental functions. Admiral Sungmin's fleets maintained a permanent presence in the home systems of every species that had participated in the war against Earth. His ships were not there as occupying forces, but as a constant reminder of what happened when civilizations chose violence over diplomacy. The sight of human vessels hanging peacefully in their skies taught alien populations lessons their governments had learned too late. The reconstruction of alien military capabilities proceeded under strict human oversight. Species were allowed, to maintain defensive forces sufficient to protect their worlds from raiders and criminals. But any weapon system capable of threatening human interests was quietly removed or neutralized. The galaxy discovered that humans could be remarkably generous conquerors, provided their subjects remembered who was truly in charge. Dr. Hyeri's research teams were now working to understand how different species could coexist peacefully under the new galactic order. Her psychological profiles had been instrumental in defeating alien military forces, but now they were being used to design educational programs that would prevent future conflicts. The same knowledge that had brought down empires was being used to build a more stable civilization. The Varric's homeworld had become a showcase for human administrative efficiency. Under the guidance of human advisors, the planet's population was experiencing unprecedented prosperity and technological advancement. Former military installations had been converted into research centers, where Varric scientists worked alongside human engineers to develop technologies that benefited both species. Captain Insu now commanded a mixed crew of humans and aliens aboard, a ship that patrolled the frontier regions where the galaxy's expansion continued. His vessel served as both explorer and enforcer, ensuring that new worlds were settled according to human standards for peaceful coexistence. The aggressive expansion that had characterized alien civilization for millennia was being replaced by careful, sustainable growth. The economic transformation of galactic civilization had been as dramatic as the military conquest. Trade routes that had been controlled by powerful cartels were now open to all species on equal terms. Technological development proceeded at unprecedented rates as human scientists shared knowledge that alien civilizations had spent centuries trying to discover independently. Commander Subin led training programs that taught alien military officers how to think in terms of defense rather than conquest. Her students included former enemies who were learning to see strength as a tool for protection rather than domination. The psychological shift required to accept this new paradigm was proving as challenging as any military campaign. Engineer Da-Un's most dangerous weapon designs remained locked away in secure facilities, but her less destructive innovations were transforming life throughout the galaxy. Medical technologies that could extend alien lifespans, environmental restoration tools that could repair damaged worlds, and manufacturing systems that could end scarcity on any planet that accepted human oversight. The cultural impact of human dominance was perhaps the most profound change of all. Species that had built their identities around military conquest were being forced to find new sources of pride and purpose. Art, science, and philosophy were flourishing in societies that had previously valued only martial achievement. The galaxy was becoming more civilized under human guidance than it had ever been under its own leadership. President Yu Na announced the completion of the transition period during a ceremony broadcast to every inhabited world in known space. She explained that Earth's military intervention had been necessary to prevent the galaxy from destroying itself through endless warfare. Now that peace had been established, humans were prepared to step back from direct control and allow other species to govern themselves within the framework of the new order. The announcement that shocked the galaxy was Yu Na's revelation that humans had never intended to become permanent rulers. Earth's goal had always been to create a civilization where diplomacy could function effectively, where disputes could be resolved without violence, and where all species could pursue their development without fear of attack. Military dominance had been a tool to achieve these goals, not an end in itself. Chancellor Minho stood to address the reformed Galactic Council for the first time since the war ended. His words carried the same measured tone that Hyun Ki had used during the dark days when humans were dismissed as weak and primitive. But now every delegate understood the power that backed those quiet words, and they listened with the attention that had been denied to his predecessor. The new galactic constitution that Minho presented had been carefully crafted to prevent the conditions that had led to the recent war. Military buildups beyond defensive needs were prohibited, attacks on civilian populations were classified as crimes against civilization, and all disputes between species were required to go through mandatory mediation before any hostile action could be considered. Admiral Kyung-Soo's massive fleets began withdrawing from alien home systems as the new treaty took effect. The ships that had terrified the galaxy into submission were returning to their hidden bases, where they would wait patiently for the next time someone mistook human politeness for weakness. The visible reminder of human power was being removed, but the memory of what that power could accomplish would last forever. The final session of the transition period ended with Ambassador Hyun-ki returning to the podium where he had spent 30 years pleading for peace. The old diplomat had lived. To see his patient work vindicated in the most dramatic way possible, his quiet warnings about the cost of war had been proven correct, and his faith in diplomacy had been restored through the ultimate demonstration of military might. As Hyun-ki delivered his closing remarks, he reminded the assembled delegates that humans had never wanted to rule the galaxy through force. Earth species preferred cooperation to conquest, negotiation to annihilation, and peace to victory. But the galaxy had learned an important lesson about the relationship between strength and diplomacy. Sometimes, the only way to achieve lasting peace was to demonstrate the capacity for total war. The new age of galactic civilization began with every species understanding that humans were once again choosing to be polite, but that this choice came with clearly defined limits. The galaxy had been given a second chance to prove that civilized behavior was possible, and everyone understood that there would not be a third chance if they failed to learn from their mistakes.